Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I'm very excited today because I've wanted to do this video for a very long time, and I feel like a lot of people have asked me about this author a lot, so I just kind of really want to take the time and just do this full author spotlight on one of my favorite contemporary horror authors, Ronald Malfi. If you have watched my channel before, you know that I absolutely adore Ronald Malfi. I've read a ton of his work. And he's just one of these like lesser known authors that I really think should be on a much higher pedestal. We should be talking about him way more. He should be up there with names like Paul Tremblay and Grady Hendrix. And for some reason he's just not. So I really want to take the time today to talk about who Ronald Malfi is as an author, what his style is like, and why I love him, and what books I love. So for those of you guys who don't know, Ronald Malfi is a Maryland-based kind of like, I don't want to say like new wave author, but he is kind of like flipping the types of horror cliches that we see over and over again on their head. I think Wikipedia called him like an art horror writer, art house horror or whatever. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that because I wouldn't quite say his stuff is like very like Ari Astery or A24-ish, which is like very art house horror. He does like to take a lot of modern horror tropes and completely rewrite and redesign them. I say he's Maryland-based because a vast majority of his novels are set in small-town Maryland. That's important to me because I am from Maryland originally, and I adore Maryland, and I kind of feel like how people from Maine must feel when they read Stephen King stories, because it's like, like small-town Maine. Like, I totally get the vibe and where he's coming from when I read about small-town Maryland in his stories. So Malfi has written 16 novels and 8 novellas. Unfortunately, a lot of his novels have gone out of print. Slowly, there's been more of this like resurgence of his stuff coming back into print. I know Open Road Media is a publishing company that's recently re-released a lot of Malfi stuff. Like, they just re-released December Park. This book came out in 2014 and was out of print since like 2015. It was originally released by Cemetery Dance Publications, I believe. And this was like almost impossible to find. This is a brand new copy of December Park. I will be giving this away in December. You can follow me on Instagram at Prynne for info on how to get a copy of this. This is my favorite book by Ronald Malfi, so have to be able to share the love. But yeah, so a lot of his stuff has gone out of print, so a lot of it's a little harder to find. But the stuff that has been coming out recently has kind of stayed more frequently in print, and it's just a freaking joy to read. And I highly recommend anybody interested in horror pick up a Ronald Malfi book. So for those of you guys who don't know, to be featured in my like author spotlight series, you've got to be primarily a horror author. I have to have read at least 3 of your works. You must have released a book within the last 15 years. And that's kind of it. I really want to do this to focus attention on newer horror authors. Like, I feel like everybody really knows about like Stephen King, Dan Simmons, like the big ones. But there's a lot of awesome new indie authors coming out, and I really like to take this space to really just highlight who they are and how they write and why I like them. So as I was saying, Malfi's really good at taking modern horror tropes and kind of flipping them on their head. You can kind of find, like, I don't want to say that he does like creature features, but he definitely has like an interesting presentation of creature features. The first thing I ever read by Malfi was his novel Snow, which is basically, it's kind of a Christmas novel. It is set on Christmas Eve. And it's kind of the story of these survivors in a snowstorm surviving like a consolidated zombie apocalypse if the zombies were like snow zombies. It's really interesting. I've never read anything like that. And I really liked it. It was a great like winter story. He has his novel The Narrows, which is about vampires infecting a small town in Maryland, but the vampires are almost more like traditional parasites rather than vampires. Like, they're very insect-like, which I thought was really interesting. The Narrows is definitely not one of my favorite Malfi stories. I think honestly it's probably my least favorite Malfi story, and it wasn't because it was a bad book by any means. It was just, to me, the least engaging. I expect a lot from Ronald Malfi. I expect a lot of character development, a lot of like interesting theories and concepts, and ways to look at things. He's very into like metaphors. So The Narrows to me was just kind of like a traditional vampire story with a spin on vampires, but there wasn't much beyond that. And then you've got Floating Staircase and Come With Me, which are both spins on ghost stories. What I really, really like about both of those is Ronald Malfi definitely has his own idea of a ghost narrative and how ghosts act and operate. And both of those stories, though very, very different in concept, can stay very, very true to how ghosts operate and act in his world. And it's very Kurt Vonnegut-ish, where everything is kind of cyclical, and I really, really like that. I think it's really interesting, and it's not something you've really seen done in ghost stories before. But let's talk about my highlighted books today. So first up, I want to talk about Bone White. This is going to be another very winter-focused novel. I'm going to read the back of the book for you guys. This book originally came out in 2017 and is one that is still widely available in print. You can get your hands on this pretty easily. So it says, Paul Gallo saw the report on the news. A mass murderer leading police to his victims' graves in remote Dred's Hand, Alaska. It's the same bit of wilderness where his twin brother went missing a year ago. As the bodies are exhumed, Paul travels to Alaska to get closure and put his grief to rest. But the mystery is only beginning. What Paul finds are superstitious locals who talked of the devil stealing souls and a line of wooden crosses to keep what's in the woods from coming out. The more he searches for answers, the more he finds himself becoming part of the mystery. I loved this book. I believe this was a 4-star read from me. This is a really, really interesting one. It's sort of a spin on a Wendigo story, but not. The whole time you're kind of like Wendigo, 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 and then it's not quite a Wendigo, but it's interesting. And it's very much worth the read. This is also kind of like a crime drama. It's a very unique story as well. It is set in like a tiny, tiny town in Alaska and primarily takes place in like the open wilderness of Alaska. And I just thought this was an absolute joy to read. This is very gothic in the sense that this kind of creepy town and the Alaskan landscape are characters of their own. The setting and atmosphere in this is just absolutely beautiful and unnerving. And I just think that this is one of the earlier Malfi books that I read, and it just really, really stuck with me. I think this was the second Malfi book I ever read. And it's just, if you compare this to Snow, while Snow is a great and fun zombie story, this is a very, very sophisticated and elevated story. And you can see because there's many, many years between when Snow was published and when Bone White was published. And I just highly, highly recommend this book. This is a great starting point for Malfi, I would say, because it gives you a really good taste of his atmospheric writing and character development, as well as how he likes to shift different cliches in horror to tell different narratives and to move different plot lines forward. And I just think this is an absolutely amazing, amazing book. And then next up, I want to talk about Come With Me. This book was released in 2021. This is one of my most anticipated books of 2021, and it did not disappoint. This was a 5-star read from me. This is a ghost story, and also kind of a crime thriller, but kind of teeters more on being a ghost story than a crime thriller. I will read the back of the book for y'all. So it says, Aaron Decker's life changes one December morning, when his wife Allison is killed. Haunted by her absence and her ghost, Aaron goes through her belongings, where he finds a receipt for a motel room in another part of the country. Piloted by grief and an increasing sense of curiosity, Aaron embarks on a journey to discover what Allison had been doing in the weeks prior to her death. Yet Aaron is unprepared to discover the dark secrets Allison kept, the death and horror that make up the tapestry of her hidden life. And with each dark secret revealed, Aaron becomes more and more consumed by his obsession to learn the terrifying truth about the woman who had been his wife, even if it puts his own life at risk. This is one of the most gut-wrenching books I think I've ever read. There's a lot of very politically relevant social topics in this novel that Malfi handles very, very beautifully, kind of from the perspective of like surviving family members and victims of various catastrophes and like the kind of crime world. And I just thought this was one of the best ghost stories I think I've ever read. It's a very, very unique ghost story. It's not about a haunting at all. It's more about how the dead will help you It's more about how the dead will help you while you are still living. Again, Malfi's style of ghost is very Slaughterhouse 5-ish, very cyclical. It's really unique. It's really, really interesting. And this is such a beautiful love story. Like, this is very much about love and loss, while still being just utterly engaging. I think making this a crime thriller really, really helps balance out how much gut-wrenching, heartwarming sadness and grief you get out of this book. And I think it's really interesting. I talked about this in my video on Scarapy, my horror for mental health video. This book was written to help Ronald Malfi cope with grief of his own loss. A really good friend of his died, and he wrote this book for her. And I think this is an amazing metaphor, not only for grief, but also just for about like moving on and how to like carry on once somebody that you love is gone. And I was just astounded by how absolutely beautiful and breathtaking this book is. I really don't want to give too much away. I do have a whole video dissecting this book, but if you just want a really amazing, beautiful, unique ghost story, this is definitely a great place to start with Malfi. Very, very emotional, very, very, it's definitely the deepest book he's ever written. And I absolutely adore this. I think everybody should take a chance to read it. Maybe not the best Malfi book to start out with. It is very, very heavy, but it's not slow or anything. Again, the crime thriller aspect of it really keeps the pace up on this novel, and I just think it's very unique and really, really interesting. And again, it really connects back to his earlier novel, Floating Staircase, which is another ghost story, also very equally gut-wrenching, but not quite as heartfelt as this one. But I do love how he's continuing the use of ghosts in a very similar manner. Okay, and then last but not least, so this is my copy of December Park. This is an ARC. I got this off Amazon. This was so hard to track down because I bought this when the book was out of print still. This is one of my favorite books of all time. Yeah, this is one of my favorite books of all time. This is a coming-of-age story, and again, it's Ronald Malfi, so it's going to be definitely a different style of coming-of-age story. It is definitely a horror story, but again, leans more crime thriller. Also, I should probably say this. Ronald Malfi uses crime thriller to elevate his horror. I would say all of these novels are horror stories first, but balanced out by a crime thriller. He is definitely a horror author. And this one is really, really unique. I will read the back of the book for you guys. So it says, in the fall of 1993, the quiet suburb of Harding Farms is shocked when children begin to vanish, and one is found dead near December Park, a great sweeping expanse that is sunken below the streets and surrounded on three sides by vast woodlands, a place children believe is haunted. Newspaper call the abductor the Piper, because he has come to lead children away, while kids whisper darker names for him in the school halls. Angelo Mazzoni and his friends discover a link to the dead girl and take up the search for the killer, vowing to stop the Piper's reign of terror. Their teenage pledge becomes a journey of self-discovery and an odyssey into the darkness of their own hometown, hell on earth. So, as many of you guys know, It by Stephen King is my favorite novel of all time. My favorite genre of story is obviously coming-of-age horror, and this is right up there. I think this might be the second best coming-of-age horror story I've ever read. Like, I have so much praise for this book. I really like the unique storyline in this. It's not really about a monster, like anything supernatural. It is focused on an actual serial killer. And it is, instead of being told through the eyes of like 12-year-old children, it's told through the eyes of 16-year-olds, which I thought was a very, very unique take, because they're kind of past that age of innocence that you get from like a 12-year-old coming-of-age story, but still not adult enough to really know and understand the world. And I think kind of the reveal, like, coming-of-age horror stories, you're never going to have a happy ending. That's just how it has to work. And I really enjoy how the end of this really nails that loss of innocence. Like, they were already getting there. They were already getting older. They were already preparing for, like, hey, we're about to be in college, we're about to move on with our lives, separate from our childhood friends, and Malfi just creates this amazing, amazing metaphor. And I know a lot of people kind of have issues with the ending of this story, and I think instead of reading this novel as a a plot-driven story, if you read it very much as a metaphor-driven story, the ending makes such perfect sense. And I just find this to be absolutely incredible. And the friendships between, Angelo and Adrian, there's 5 main boys in the story, but the friendship between Angelo and Adrian, I think, is such a realistic depiction of a friendship. Adrian's kind of like the Ben Hamscom in this novel, where he's like the new kid, but it's just so perfectly written. Like, when I read December Park, I can see myself being 16 and interacting the way that these kids did, making the decisions the way that they did. And Adrian is just he's a weird character, but he's so tangible and believable and relatable. And his backstory is just so kind of devastating, and it's just such a well fleshed out story. And it does what it does so well, where we take these children who grew up in problematic situations, but have been able to like get through it, and really focus on how their past have shaped them as they are now. And it's just such an amazing story of, again, being a teenager, of like the loss of innocence, growing up, the harsh realities, while at the same time being this really cool, compelling, like, crime mystery. And I think December Park is just one of the most fantastic books I have ever read. It sold me on Ronald Malfi completely. It was so hard to track this book down. So yes, if you are interested, the book is now once again in print. I have it right here. I will be giving it away sometime in December, because again, it is just the best thing I think that Malfi has ever written, and I highly recommend anybody who's a fan of novels like it, any kind of coming of age horror story, pick up December Park. And then the good news is that Ronald Malfi will be having a brand new novel out in 2022. It is, I believe, another coming of age horror story, which is awesome. It's called Blackmouth. I'm on Goodreads right now, and it says, perfect for fans of Stephen King's It, a group of friends return to their hometown to confront a nightmare they first stumbled on as teenagers in this mesmerizing odyssey of terror. For nearly 2 decades, Jamie Warren has been running from darkness. He's haunted by a traumatic childhood and the guilt at having disappeared from his brother's life. But then a series of unusual events reunites him with his estranged brother and their childhood friends, and none of them can deny the sense of fate that has seemingly drawn them back together. Nor can they deny the memories of that summer so long ago, the strange magic taught to them by an even stranger man, and the terrible act that has followed them into adulthood. In the light of new danger, they must confront their past by facing their futures and hunting down a man who may very well be a monster. That's all that's been really released about this. I believe it comes out in July of 2022. I'm not 100% sure. Like, release dates always change this far out. But very excited about that. Again, as I just said, December Park is one of my favorite coming-of-age horror stories of all time. I'm really interested to see how Malfi approaches a second one, and I'm very interested to see if this one's going to be more on the supernatural side of things versus on the rooted in reality side of things. December Park is 100% rooted in reality. There is no doubt in my mind that that could actually happen, versus like It or Malignant Summer, all of those where there's like an actual supernatural creature pushing things forward, which again I think is what elevates December Park, because it is so rooted in reality. But yes, we do have a new Malfi coming out in 2022, and I'm so excited about it. Anyways, guys, that is all that I have today on Malfi. I highly recommend you guys check him out if you are interested in new wave horror. I think he's going to be a really significant voice, and he's got so much out there already that I'm sure you guys can find something that is more suited to your particular genre. Whether you're into crime or supernatural, he's kind of everything in between. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. If you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.